Chapter 24 is inventory control, learning objectives. So after completing this chapter, the student will be able to explain why inventory affects the bottom line, explain how minimum and maximum level inventory systems work, calculate reorder quantities using minimum and maximum inventory levels. Most pharmacies must borrow money and pay interest on the borrowed money in order to keep an adequate supply of medications on the shelf with which to fill unanticipated prescriptions. The amount paid towards the interest for borrowing money to keep drugs on the shelf affects the operating expenses and therefore affects the net profit or bottom line. Ideally, pharmacies could have all drugs on the shelf all the times, but this is practically impossible due to the high cost of medications. Although pharmacy technicians are usually not involved in securing loans for the pharmacy, they should have some appreciation for the expenses associated with maintaining an inventory and the significance of inventory control. In some retail pharmacies, of course, you do have one or two pharmacy technicians that is in charge of inventory control, and they are very particular on you not ordering too much, because sometimes if you order too much, you can get in trouble. If not ordering enough, then sometimes the patients have to come back. So as the amount of money paid for interest on borrowed money increases, profits decrease. Therefore, in order to maximize profits, the pharmacy inventory should be as low as possible while having enough medication in stock to fill the prescriptions. Your key terms are inventory. Inventory is a list of the goods on hand. Inventory control is supervising the supply and accessibility of the goods on hand to ensure adequate supply without excessive oversupply. So today they do have some computerized systems that will help you with inventory control, but however, some pharmacies do not. So they say the maximum inventory level minus the number of full bottles on hand equals the order quantity number of bottles. Okay. So when using the minimum and maximum inventory systems for ordering, the minimum and maximum control specifies the point at which an item should be reordered, minimum stocking level, and a reorder quantity ceiling, maximum stocking level. So if you look on your page, I'll just start with here on page 191 are your questions. The first one, it tells you that what we're doing here is we're going to determine how much we need to reorder. So determine the reorder quantities for the following medication using information from the minimal and maximum inventory levels on the shelf labels and on hand quantities. So the first one, of course, number 1 was Ambien. It is the 5 milligram tablet. Okay, it tells you that it has 1/2. The first number here is your minimum amount. 2 is your maximum amount that you want to have on stock. So the minimum, you always want to have at least 1 full bottle in the store. At the maximum, you only want 2, so you don't want to order 3 or 4. Okay. What it tells us here is that you have on hand is what you have in your pharmacy now is you have 1. Okay, so you have 1 in your store, but you always want between 1 and 2. So the rule kind of is if you have only the minimum left or below the minimum, then you want to reorder. So you only reorder up to the maximum. So you have 1 on hand, and if we ordered 1 more, that would give us 2. That would give us the max. Okay, so for this one, our answer, our reorder quantity would be 1. Number 2, you have Terazol 3. Your minimum is 6. The maximum, of course, to have in the store would be 12. Okay. On hand is saying we have 4 bottles on our shelf. Okay, so we are below the minimum. So we would reorder, and usually you would reorder up to the maximum. If you have to reorder, order up to the maximum. So what you need to do, is, of course, would be reorder 8, because you already have 4. 4 subtract from 8. 4 subtracted from 12 is going to equal 8. So you would reorder 8. Number 3, you have Pepsid, 20 milligrams. The minimum would be 2. The maximum that you would want to have in the store would be 5. You have on hand 4. Okay, so we would not need to reorder anything at all, because if you have if they're if you're within between the minimum and the maximum bottles that you have on your shelf, it's not appropriate to reorder at this time. Okay, so because 4 is between 2 and 5, you do not need to reorder anything. Okay, but if you had 2 or less, then we would reorder. Okay. Number 4, we have Prozac 20 milligram. We have the minimum you want to keep in stock would be 6. The maximum you would want to keep in stock it would be 12. We have on hand 1 bottle. Okay, so yes, you're below the minimum, so you would want to order. So we order up to the maximum. So 12 minus 1 would be 11. So we need to reorder 11. Number 5, you have nitrostat. You have 2, 4. Remember, 2 is the minimum. 4 is the maximum that you would want to keep in stock. Okay, so on hand, you have 3. So you're between your minimum and your maximum, so you do not need to reorder anything. So reorder 0. Number 6, and this will be the last one I do because these are actually really easy. Tylenol number 3, it tells you have 1, 2, so the minimum that you would want to have on stock would be 1. The maximum you want to have in stock is 2. On hand, you have 1, and because that's on the minimum, so if you have the minimum or less, you reorder up to the maximum. So you would reorder 2 minus 1 would be 1, so you would reorder 1 to get to the maximum. Okay. So and these are all basically the same, and that's all you're doing. Just remember, on your minimum, if your on hand is the same as your minimum or less, you reorder up to the maximum. If you have on hand in between the minimum and the maximum, you do not have to reorder at that time. Okay, please let me know if you have any concerns or questions. Just send me an email.